I am in the shop ready to continue on my saga of the V6 conversion in my 74 MGB GT. Appreciate everybody who watched the last video. Hope you got something out of it and that there was a tidbit or two that you saw, maybe that you didn't see coming. I've got some other things I want to point out to you in this video. But first thing I want to do is I want to answer a question. Somebody had posted a question on the last video about why I didn't use a 3.8 liter as opposed to the 3.4 liter. I would prefer the 3.8 liter. My coming up through the ranks in mechanic shops was Oldsmobile Buick, so I'm very familiar with the 3.8 liter Buick engine, everything they've done to it, the power performance. The reason I went with this 3.4, number one, it's been done many times. The kit is very complete, it's very straightforward. I thought it would be the easiest to do. The reason that the 3.4 liter is so attractive for the MGB is I think mainly way back when they were doing the 2.8 liter, that because it was a 60-degree block. It's a much narrower block. The space between the cylinder heads is a 60-degree V6, and the 3.8 liter is a 90-degree V6 block. So the reason that I think it was so attractive is because it fit good, and also they were plentiful, and ended up that the standard transmission was a good length, good fit. I don't know who figured it out first, but they've really come a long ways, I think. I don't know what they started with way back in the day when they started doing this, but I know that the components and the pieces of the kit that I've gotten fit well. It's been well thought out, a lot of pieces of it. So I'm gonna go with the 3.4 liter. The question was also asked about the hood clearance. And as you can see, this throttle body does sit high. It's got the bracket on it. Everything that I've seen other conversions with this motor, it didn't appear to have hood modifications. So I'm gonna work in that direction. Ultimately, what I want to do with this engine is use a front wheel, like the gentleman who asked the question, use the front wheel drive intake, which that would also require using the lower intake that bolts onto this motor, not just the top plenum, because where this plenum bolts onto the intake is different than the front wheel drive version. But I have seen it done. I've watched other videos, not necessarily on MGBs, but in the actual, I've seen a Camaro that has this motor in it, and it was converted to the front wheel drive intake plenum. So really just for ease of use, it's been done a bunch of times, and the readily available components to make this conversion, I wouldn't have to reinvent anything for the 3.8 in my first attempt at doing a V6 conversion in my GT. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you some things that I didn't do last time. First, the shifters. I wanna show you the difference in the shifters, the one that they've made for the kit that's very well thought out as compared to the stock shifter that comes in the Camaro. Also wanna show you the drive shaft. I know last video I stated that I'd put it in the transmission, it fit well, everything looked really good. I'm just gonna show it to you because somebody might have an idea of like, well, how did they get the yoke? How did they make the yoke for the GM transmission fit onto that tiny MG drive shaft? Well, I'm gonna show you that too. And there's some other things I'm gonna go over. I've made some of the modifications that I wanted to. I've marked some things. I'm going to have to make some more modifications, so this motor and tranny is gonna come back out. I'm gonna do a little bit more tweaking on the firewall, and I also found a spot on the back near the bell housing that I'm gonna need to give it a little relief so things aren't touching for a little bit more clearance. So I'm gonna get started on that. Okay, I'm gonna show you some things that I wanna just point out. The shifter, the drive shaft. Let me get this thing over here. We've got, I want to show you the original drive shaft that came out of this car and just show you the differences in how they've done it in this kit. If you look at this drive shaft, original drive shaft out of this GT, you know, everybody who knows MGBs knows that they're bolted together on both ends. One side's bolted to the flange on the transmission, the other one's bolted to the flange on the differential, and it accomplishes its need to slide from the rear differential going up and down from a slip joint in this. And when they created the drive shaft to do the V6 conversion, they actually beefed up. It's a bigger U-joint that's on the end. This is the part that bolts to the differential, of course, because it's still got the 4 bolts. Nice. It's got a grease fitting in it, so you can lubricate it. The other end's got the bigger U-joints too. Also has the grease fitting in it to where you can lube them both, which is really nice. So, and then you have the slip yoke. And this is where the difference in it is that any normal rear-wheel drive car that's not an MGB that uses a slip yoke inside the transmission for that little bit of difference when the rear differential goes up and down and there's got to be an in and out motion of the drive shaft, they use, like most everybody does, the slip yoke. And so I've already, like I said, put this in. It fits great. It's got just enough space that you can tell even when the suspension is completely sagging down that it's out enough. I'm real happy with how that's going to fit and how that's going to work. The other thing that I wanted to show you was the shifters. So this is the factory shifter out of the 95 Camaro and how it's configured. Pretty straightforward. It's a straight shaft, not need for a little bit of bend in it. Here is the one for the kit, and same configuration if you see how it's laid out. And if you look at this, it's got a really drastic offset on it. And you look at that and think, well, how in the world is that going to work? Why would they do that? Well, let me show you why they did that. If you look down in your transmission, and this is just a natural, just the way that it's made. Let me get a light. All right, I got some light on it. Don't know if you can tell from that angle. Let me see if I can bring it down. My camera's about level with the floorboard of the car, and if you can see that correctly, there is a pretty good tilt to the left of this transmission. Just the way it's made, you know, not because of an install or how it had to be put in. That's just the way it's made. So the reason that this thing is offset like this is so that when it's actually set down in there, it's sitting at an angle, and when it's going to be set in place, bolted in, put it in neutral, your shifter is going to be practically in the exact same spot as it is with the factory MG transmission. And if you can also see, I put some relief on this area right here. I was able to give it some relief, leave the holes in place for the plate that goes over top of it, just to make it easy to get this in and out of there, because it was a pretty tight fit in there, trying to wiggle it in there. And so I'm just making life easier for myself. But that's what it looks like in there. And it's I can't tell from filming it like this, but it is a pretty good offset to the left on this. I want to show you one more thing out underneath the hood. If you remember last video when I was looking at trying to cut some metal out of that, I actually got it cut out, pulled the motor and transmission back out of it, and as you can see now, I've got my header sitting down in there. If I can zoom in on this, and you can see where I've taken that relief. If you look in the last video I did, pretty good relief. And when I pulled the motor out, I had put a pretty good cut in that metal, and it didn't take much to take that metal and bring it over and close the gap on it. So you really can't see it right now, but as you can see, I'm going to need to take a little bit more out. I want to relieve this a little bit more for this upper header bolt, and also because even though that this motor is sitting in there pretty much where it needs to be, my header is still making contact there. So what I didn't have a grease pencil, but I used frequently just regular old whiteout, mark my metal where I'm going to need to push it back some. And when I get the motor out of there, also I realized, and you can't see it from here, but the two upper belt housing bolts, I don't know if you can see them in there, but they are like right up against the firewall. So when I get the motor back out, I'll take another video and show you what I need to do to the firewall just to make sure I have enough clearance between those two upper belt housing bolts and the firewall. Well, another thing I wanted to show you that comes with the kit. There's a coupler. If you're looking at your MGB and you're seeing that big round coupler that goes on this thing, and you're going to say, wow, it's going to be tight. Well, what they've done is they've created a smaller version with a whole lot narrower, the correct splines and everything. So when this goes in there, it's going to be sitting in there, and it's going to have good clearance, go down in the right direction, and it's going to clear very, very well. So again, thought out well. And I am going to pull this motor out. Going to get the motor out of there so I can do a little bit more work on that. Oh yeah, there was one more thing. When I was showing you the last video about, I was worried about the gas pedal clearance. When I pulled the gas pedal bracket, the lever arm on this thing, right back here is where it pivots at with the bolt, but then it lays right inside here, behind here, and I was kind of concerned about smashing this and having to modify the pedal bracket. Well, let me show you, because it actually is still working really well. We'll see if it turns out that way from my next one. But if you see up in there, this is the up position, full up position. This is full down position against the bracket for the gas pedal. And I've got plenty of clearance in there. It's not rubbing at all. It's moving good. I can't say that'll be the case depending on how much more I smash that in to get my header clearance. But, you know, it's working good right now. So pretty happy with that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up for today. I want to keep these videos short and informative, and I hope that you did find it informative. Next video, I'm going to be pulling the motor, do a little bit more relief work on the firewall. And until then, thanks for watching.